to be here with you as we discuss finding success in prioritization. So buckle up and let's get started. So a little bit about me before we get started. Hi, my name is Garrison Gross. I work for a major automotive company as a senior product manager. I have 10 years of experience in Fintech, 7 years in software, and 5 years in coaching. I like to build things. I like to experiment and tinker, and I'm a big fan of bringing out the best in the people and the teams that I work with. I have a beautiful wife who is a teacher for the blind. I enjoy snowboarding, mentoring aspiring PMs, and traveling. P.S. My favorite food is tacos. So why are we here today? Well, today we're going to cover a few things. The first thing we're going to cover is factors to consider when setting priorities. When we think about setting priorities, there's a lot of variables involved, and we'll dig into some of that today so that you can get a better understanding of what that dynamic might look like. From there, we'll understand how to balance feedback with real product needs. We get feedback from our customers, we get feedback from our stakeholders, from our engineers, from our designers, from legal, from marketing, from outside consultants. What do we do with all this feedback, and how do we balance real product needs? Well, we'll dive into that today. And with that, we'll discuss 5 frameworks that I like to use for prioritization. And then finally, we'll dive into some common pitfalls in prioritization. These are going to be the things that you want to look out for and that you want to get in front of. So deciding what to build or what to build next is one of the most critical parts of a product manager's job. You only get so many chances to make an impact. Given that, it's so vital to choose wisely and make the most of your window of opportunity. So what are those factors? There's many factors to consider when we're setting priorities for our product. And here are a few. First and foremost, at the center of the stage is our users. We want to know who our users are and what their pain points are. And are we prioritizing the right pain points? And then how does it speak to the North Star of and the strategic priorities of your organization? We want to make sure that our pain points and for the user is fitting into the strategic priorities of our organization. And so you might look at metrics such as engagement, monetization, retention, and adoption. You may look at conversion rate. You may look at churn rate. There are a lot of different metrics, such as NPS. Understanding which metrics you're using, the industry in which you're playing, is vital to understand who your users are. From there, we want to know what the OKRs of our product are. We talked a little bit about that North Star, and so we want to speak to that. What is the mission of the organization, and what are the OKRs for our product? When we think about working in development teams, oftentimes there are dependencies. And this is something that we want to think about as a factor when we're prioritizing our work, is if we have dependencies on other teams. Because many of you know that we can't complete our work unless that dependent team gets done their work first. And so that adds risk to our development. Next, we want to think about what our team development capacity looks like. For example, prioritizing in Q2 versus Q4 might be totally different. Quarter 4 has a lot of holidays. A lot of people are spending time with family. And it's important for us to understand how that might impact our capacity. And that may impact what priorities or what features we're able to prioritize, because we might have a little less capacity. And so we want to take that into consideration. And then finally, sequencing of our work. We want to understand, when are we going to work on what? What are we going to work on first? What are we going to work on second? What are we going to work on third? And when we're working on these things, it's important that we limit our WIP. And while doing this, sometimes there's dependencies and other risks that are associated with development. And so when we think about these factors, some are more complex than others. We must think through them so that we can have a better grasp of how we might set our priorities. And so I'm curious to hear from you. What are some of the factors that you consider when you're setting your priorities? But first and foremost, before we can set our priorities, we really must understand if we're prioritizing solving real customer problems. All too often, organizations don't stick to this central idea of product development, central tenet, if you will, possibly because you're prioritizing innovation above value. Are you focused on moonshots? We all want others to see us as cutting edge trailblazers. But here's the deal. That's not always what the market is clamoring for. Sometimes they just want moderate improvements on things that are already functional. So instead of chasing after the ultimate game changer, it's sometimes better to prioritize spending resources and time and effort on removing friction points and making things a little easier for our customer. And so when you think of making things easier for your customer, you will think of their pain points. And what pain points are those? Do they have productivity pain points? Are they looking to be more efficient? Are they looking to be more effective? Is there financial pain points? What is the cost of your product? What is the value that it provides? Do they have process pain points? Is it challenging for them to find your product? Is it challenging for them to use a feature within your product? When you think of user workflows in that customer journey, is it easy for them to take action on what they need to take action on? And then finally, we may categorize our pain points in support. Are folks able to find the information that they need when they need help? And are they able to find it fast? And is it effective? So how do we balance feedback with real product needs? As a product manager, how do you decide on what to work on next? How do you determine if an initiative is worth pursuing in the first place? Well, here's the thing. In most cases, nobody is going to give you a handwritten plan guiding you step by step to complete your initiative. It's awesome to work with our product owners, but we do this work together, and we can't expect our product owners to come up with this plan for us. That's why you have to learn to prioritize your work, optimize your cross-functional teams' workflows, and know how to quickly assess whether or not an initiative is worth your company's time and budget. How do you do that? Well, here are my 5 go-to frameworks that do just that. Picture this. You're a US Army general faced with many high-stake issues. How do you make effective decisions with speed and certainty? President Dwight Eisenhower himself developed the concept behind what would later be called what we have in front of us, which is the Eisenhower Matrix. Back in the day, he used this to help him prioritize and deal with the many high-stakes issues he faced as a US Army general, then as a Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces, and eventually the President of the United States. Decades later, author Stephen Covey popularized Eisenhower's framework in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is an awesome book. I highly recommend it. Again, it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you've read that book, I'm curious to hear from you. What is the number one takeaway that you've learned from Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Drop it in the chat. And so, as a result of Covey's work, the Eisenhower Matrix has become a widely used time management and decision-making framework in business. So how does it work? Well, we start off with this 2x2 square. On the vertical axis, we have importance, and on the horizontal axis, we have urgency. The first box is urgent and important. So think of learning new skills. Maybe you need to learn a new technology. Maybe you need to learn a new soft skill. Maybe it's your team is going to be developing a new product and there are specific frameworks or technologies they need to learn. These could be time-sensitive tasks that must be taken care of now. These could be long-term goals. This could be planning. Next, we have not urgent and important. These are things that perhaps are not time sensitive, but they do add value to the product. These are the things that we want to schedule to ensure that progress is being made. These are the things that we want to get in front of and put on our calendars. Next is urgent and not important. These are the things that add little to no value to your product. They might be time sensitive, and these are the things we want to delegate to someone so that you can focus on the most important tasks instead as a product manager. Finally, we have the things that bucket in not important and not urgent. At best, do these in your leisure time. Maybe it's an email. Maybe it's a phone call from a vendor who wants to sell their product, but you're not looking. One of my favorite frameworks for maybe it's a product interview or it's getting a high level idea of if this product is worth it is the RICE framework. RICE allows product teams to work on the initiatives that are most likely to impact any given goal. And the scoring system kind of measures each feature or initiative against these 4 factors, which is reach, impact, confidence, and effort. Here's a little bit of a breakdown of what that looks like. First, we have reach. We might ask ourselves, how many people will this feature affect within a given time period? So for example, we may be thinking of how many customers will we have per quarter? We might think of how many transactions might we have per month? We want to think in the terms of quantitative metrics when we think of reach. Next is impact. How much will this impact the users? Use a multiple scale choice for this. So for example, what that scale might look like is a 3 might say, hey, this is going to have a massive impact, versus a 1, which might say medium impact, whereas maybe 0.5 means low impact. What's most important is that you're using the same scoring system across your colleagues, that you're all using the same system so that we're talking in the same terms. Next is confidence. How confident are we about the impact and the reach scores? How much data do we have to back up those estimates? And what is our confidence, right? In a percentage way. So are we 100% confident? Are we 80% confident? Are we 50% confident, which might show a low confidence? And finally, effort. How much of a time investment will this initiative require from product design and development? You might measure as persons per month, such as how much work one team member can do a month. However, there are also other ways that you can measure this. Let's talk about the pros and cons of using the RICE method. One of the pros of using the RICE method is that it requires product teams to make their product metrics smart before they quantify them. They need to be very specific. They need to be measurable. They need to be attainable, relevant, and as seen in the parameter for reach score, they must be time-based as well. And so it's important that we're very specific and we have a structured answer or structure when we think of using this RICE method. It's very helpful. It's a pro for us. Another pro of this is it kind of lessens the influence that inherent biases have on prioritization. And by adding the confidence dimension in the calculation, prioritization moves away from attempting to predict success to measuring the level of assertion each team member has for its features. This shifts the prioritization discussion from how much this feature is worth to here is how we are quantifying our level of confidence for each of these qualitative speculative scores. As you might imagine, there are also some cons associated with the RICE method. And one of those cons is that it doesn't take account dependencies. There are times with an initiative when an initiative has a high RICE score and it needs to be deprioritized over something else. So product teams need to treat the score as an exercise rather than an end-all, be-all answer to what should we build next. The second con of using this method is estimations will never be 100% accurate. The RICE prioritization is simply an exercise in quantifying features in a way that takes into account the level of confidence teams have on their estimations. Next, we're going to go ahead and look at the Moscow. When you're thinking of a new product, you might think of the Moscow method, and it allows you to figure out what matters most to your stakeholders and customers by classifying features into 4 priority buckets. First is must have. These are features that have to be present for the product to be functional at all. They're non-negotiable and essential. If one of these requirements or features isn't present, the product cannot be launched. And so an example of that might be users must log in to access their account. So for example, let's say you're making a payment. A must have, let's say you're an account or a website and you're looking to take payments from your customer. How are you authenticating those users? How do you know who they are? And so a must have might be the user must log into their account before they can make a payment. Next is should haves. That's the S we see here. These requirements are important to deliver, but they're not time sensitive. Users, for example, users should have the option to reset their password. This might, if they can't do this, it might lead to a bad customer experience. But it's not something that we must have in order to launch this product. So we would categorize this as a should feature. Next is the C, which stands for could have. This one's like that thing of like someone asks you, where do you want to go for dinner? And you're like, well, I don't really know. These are features that are neither essential nor important to deliver within a time frame. They're bonuses that would greatly improve the customer satisfaction, but don't have a great impact if they're left out. So for example, users could save their work directly to the cloud from our app. Sure, this would be a nice feature to have if you're a product that allows users to input work, but the user could also save the file to their local drive. Finally, we're going to talk about won't haves, and these are the least critical features, tasks or requirements, and they're sometimes the first to go when we have resource constraints. These are sometimes features that will be considered in future releases. What's interesting about the Moscow model is that it's dynamic and it allows room for evolving priorities. So you might ask, if a feature is considered won't have, is it possible that one day it could become a must have depending on the type of product? Yes, absolutely. Things change over time. Customer behaviors change over time. What are some pros of using this Moscow framework? Well, I think it's good for involving stakeholders without a technical background in the product prioritization process. If I ask you to calculate WSJF, weighted shortest job first, or to calculate cost of delay, you're probably a more experienced product manager. You understand these terms. You understand these frameworks and calculations. And so a Moscow is a framework that is easy to understand and to keep things at high level. It's a quick, easy, and intuitive way of communicating priorities to the team and our customers. And it really allows us to think about resource allocation when we classify our features and requirements into each bucket. With pros comes cons. And so one of the cons of using this framework is it's tempting. It's very, very tempting for teams and stakeholders to overestimate the number of must-have features. It's an exercise in formulating release criteria more than a prioritization method. The next framework that I'm going to talk a little bit about today is story mapping. But before I talk about this, I'd like to hear from you. Can you tell me about your experience with story mapping? What are some of the things that you like about story mapping that you enjoy? What are some of the challenges that you found when doing this exercise with your team? I'd love to hear from you, so please feel free to put your comments in the comment box and we will revisit them throughout our conversation. So story mapping. The beauty of this product prioritization framework is in its simplicity. What I also like about this is that it puts the focus on the user experience rather than on the internal opinions of your team and stakeholders. So as you can see, along the horizontal line, you create a series of sequential buckets or categories that represent each stage of the user's journey throughout your product. This is sometimes known as the customer's journey. If you're working through multiple products, you may have this user journey stem through multiple products. This allows you to think about the way your customers navigate your product from signing up to setting up their profile to using specific features. Along the vertical line, you then place these tasks in order of importance from top to bottom. What this does is it allows us to prioritize in the order of features that we'll be working on. And on our product team, sometimes the bottom part of the axis is labeled backlog items for the tasks that you decide to put in hold. And finally, you will draw a line across these stories to divide them into releases and sprints. Another way that you could think about this is, who am I releasing to? What users am I releasing to in release 1? What users am I releasing to in release 2? And what users am I releasing into release 3? The way this is displayed right now, it's displayed saying these are the products, these are the features that we're going to release in each release. But there's also the way of doing that by saying which users are you going to release to. Story mapping is a great tool for understanding the big picture. It's a great tool from going out of backlog refinement where the team might be in the weeds to pulling up a whiteboard and starting to visualize the things you have to build. It's a great tool to go really high up, get the team focused and aligned on what are the steps that we have to complete in this workflow, and then go back into backlog refinement and dig into the requirements for each of these. This is great to get everyone together and aligned on where we're going. So as I just mentioned, one of the pros of this prioritization framework is it helps us quickly and efficiently identify our MVP. It's all centered around the user experience, and you get to write the user stories. It's a collaborative method and a group exercise that involves the whole team. And we know at the end of the day, teams are the engine to value creation. It's important for us to be aligned. One of the cons of using this framework is it doesn't necessarily take into account external product prioritization factors such as business value and complexity. And so this prioritization framework may not show how many systems that each one of these steps have to complete. For example, if you're looking to look for more information on, you want to search for an item, maybe your team has to call 5 or 6 or 7 different teams through APIs, and now it's touching multiple systems. We don't necessarily see that with the story mapping method. Overall, though, story mapping is a great resource to bring your team together on where you're trying to go and what are the steps that you need to take for the customer to achieve that development. And what might that look like for a customer? Finally, we have cost of delay. Picture this. It's September 2016, and Apple announces an iPhone without a headphone jack. It announced an accessory that provides a workaround, a pair of wireless earbuds called AirPods, which it said it would ship in October. Later, Apple changed their tune and communicated that it needs a little more time to ship the AirPods. A spokesperson for Apple came out and said, "We don't believe in shipping a product before it's ready, and we need a little more time before AirPods are ready for our customers." They eventually released this in December 2016. Here's the thing. If you're looking for a way to communicate the impact of time on the outcomes you achieve, specifically cost of delay allows us to ask these questions. And so when we think back to the example that I just gave with the Apple AirPods, we might ask, what would this feature be worth if the product had it right now, right? So with the AirPods, what if that feature would have been released in October versus December? The next question we might ask is, how much would it be worth if this feature gets made earlier? And then finally, we could ask ourselves, how much would it cost if this was made later than planned? Like in the example that we see here today with Apple. So One thing that you want to keep in mind while prioritizing projects is that overall value is not just money, nor is it all cost paid, nor is all cost paid in dollars. Certainly you're looking for a return on investment. However, we also must consider what will happen to our market share, customer loyalty, and brand integrity as we make these trade-offs to meet or delay deadlines. For example, if you choose to delay a project or product and your biggest competitor releases their version of your product, what will it do to your market share? When we think back to the Apple example, what if what if a competitor would have released a product sooner? On the flip side, what if you rush to market and release buggy software? How will that impact customer loyalty and perhaps overall sales? Will it detract from your brand loyalty? This is what Apple decided to do. They didn't want to release buggy software. They knew that it could impact their customer loyalty and perhaps overall sales, so they made a decision to wait. So when you think of using cost of delay, one of the pros is that it allows you to quantify your product backlog in terms of money. It also helps product managers make better decisions based on the value that matters most to the company. When you think about it, it changes the team's mindset around features from cost and efficiency metrics to speed and value. So with that, there are also some cons that are associated with this framework. And I think one of the biggest cons is that the parameters for determining the monetary value of a feature are based on gut feel and intuition. Maybe it's based on an algorithm. Either way, this can lead to an internal disagreements regarding the arbitrary value of any given feature. And so that's something we'd want to keep in mind when we're looking at cost of delay. So next, I want to talk to you about some of the common pitfalls when prioritizing. These are the things that you would want to look out for when you're prioritizing your work. The first one is, and I know I'm a victim of this, and that's not having enough time. And what that looks like is if we're not prioritizing our time, or if we're procrastinating, then, or most of the times when we think about our products, we're just not prioritizing the time to plan and prioritize. And so that can be a huge pitfall. If we don't take the time to think of what our strategy is, then how do we know that we're going to be executing on that strategy and that we're going in that direction? The next one is setting roadmap priorities without customer feedback. Without customer feedback, how do you know you're solving the right pain points? If we're not asking our customers and getting feedback from them on a regular cadence, the things that we're doing carry much higher risk. And while experimentation is awesome, we want to have experimentation that's focused on removing customers' pain points and solving the right pain points. Talked a little bit about this. Not solving real customer problems. An example of this perhaps could be maybe you're a product team and you're migrating to a new server. That's awesome. But it's likely not solving real customer problems. And so while there's these things we have to do from an organizational perspective, it's important for us to be aware of how they may impact our timelines and how they may impact us from delivering solutions to our customers that provide them value. Next is failing to consider the big picture. Think about the now, near, and far. What are the things you need to do now to get where you want to go? Sometimes this can be a leading indicator. What are the things you need to do now to enable something else to happen? So maybe you want to become an organization that delivers thousands of experiments a year. What are the things that you have to do now in order to get there? Maybe you're a product team and you're looking to decommission legacy systems, legacy code, legacy products. What are the things you need to do now so that you can decommission those things later. And this one, the next one really hits home to me. When you think of agile, it's so important that we take in new information. And so the next common pitfall is refusing to adapt new information. When COVID hit, the world changed. The consumer changed. If we don't adapt the new trends in customer behaviors, we will have a problem. We will lose our customers. And so that's why it's so important for us to be agile and to adapt to new information. So when we discuss how do we find success in prioritization, the first thing that we must do is we must dedicate the time to do it. We must have discipline, and we must be consistent with dedicating that time on a cadence to plan. Just because you buy a tool doesn't mean you know how to use it. And so the next thing that's very important if you want to find success in prioritization is using the frameworks and using them effectively. We talked a little bit today, I discussed a little bit today about some of the tools that you can use in prioritizing. Those tools have pros and cons. Know which tool to use and when. Be easy on yourself though. It takes time and practice. Practice the frameworks. Talk about them with your colleagues. The more you use them, the better you'll get at them and understanding how to use them and when. Next is understanding your roadmap. It's important we understand the now, near, and far. When we do that, we can be successful in prioritization because we understand what our needs are for now and near for our customer, but we also can keep in our sight what needs to happen in the far. Where do we want to go? Next is working with dependent teams sooner than later. For example, it's June 20th today. End of Q2 for a lot of folks is at the end of this month. And so as you're working through prioritization, these dependent teams, they need to do analysis before they can commit to doing work. And so you want to get in front of those dependent teams sooner so that they can do the analysis and come back with estimates of what that work might be for them before prioritization kicks off, before decisions are made in prioritization. Otherwise, it might be very challenging for you to get the work that you need prioritized with those teams. We want to burn down risks sooner than later. It's important for us to seek alignment. When we do this, we're successful. When we get consensus on product direction and we're all on the same page, it generally leads to success. We want to make sure everyone's rowing the boat in the same direction. We want to make sure we're solving real customer problems. When we talked a little bit about pain points, what are those problems? Are they productivity pain points? Are they process pain points? Are they financial pain points? What are some of those pain points that our customers have, and are we solving real problems for them? Maybe it's very difficult for them to get help. So how are we simplifying that for them? And if we're solving real customer problems, that means we're talking to our customer. We're leveraging qualitative and quantitative feedback. We know that data speaks to quantitative feedback, and that speaking to our customers provides that qualitative feedback. And then finally, about when in doubt, know your North Star. Your features should tie back to your OKRs and the company's strategic goals. And if you're doing that, then you're doing the right thing. I want to thank each of you for sharing this time with us. I want to thank Product Management HQ for the opportunity to be here. Check out my LinkedIn and follow me for more information and more on product management frameworks and topics. Scan the QR code and it'll take you to my page. Thank you. Hope to see you soon.